Hey, Tom, do you think if I have an episode where I have some foul language, I should let listeners know?
Yeah, I do. I don't think people pay much attention to the E on certain episodes. You're not talking about a past episode, are you?
No, I'm talking about one that's coming up. It has some colorful language as well as some graphic content. Do you think there should be a warning on that?
I think you think that, and I agree. And I think you breaking in and just mentioning that, you know, your guests are your guests, and not all of them have the same standards of language that you do, and that they simply, you know, if that's going to be a problem, then, you know, skip to over the maybe this week this show is just not for them.
All right. So, Tom and everyone else, this is your warning. Listener discretion is advised.
And that moment, for some reason, my brain just went to this place of there's a larger picture to this. You're going to get through this. It's okay. This isn't going to kill you. And this is just a part of life, and let's surrender to it. And I felt this peace come over me. And I decided on my trip back to Chicago for my dad's funeral, I was going to look for the beauty in things. And the first thing I found before I even left was I was packing, and I realized, oh, I have a broken foot. I only have to pack one shoe.
ADHD Rewired, episode number 57. This is the show designed to help those of us who have really good intentions and a slightly wandering attention. My name is Eric Tivers. I'm a licensed clinical social worker, coach, and consultant. We know that starting can be the hardest part, so let's get started. But first, let me thank our sponsors. Support for this podcast comes from Audible. For a free audiobook download, go to erictivers.com/audible for a link for that free download and for some hand-picked recommendations. Go to erictivers.com/audible for your free audiobook download. Zoom video conferencing is so easy to use that with all the extra time I saved not having to configure complicated settings, I recorded this promotion. Support ADHD Rewired and check out Zoom video conferencing. Go to erictivers.com/Zoom. Again, that's erictivers.com/Zoom. Get a Zoom room. This is the final week you can register for this summer's ADHD Rewired Coaching and Accountability Group. Schedule your screening call now. You can call me at 224-993-9450 or go to coachingrewired.com. That's coachingrewired.com. Welcome back to another episode of ADHD Rewired. I'm here with my guest, Paul Gilmartin. Paul Gilmartin is the host of the Mental Illness Happy Hour, which is an awesome podcast. Also, you might know him from TNT's Dinner and a Movie, which was broadcast on TNT from 1995 until 2011. And in 1999, he realized, as was on his website, he's not just an asshole. He had clinical depression. A few years later after that, he realized he was a little bit less of an asshole, but still had a little bit of that. And he realized he also had alcoholism and has been sober since 2003. And he started the Mental Illness Happy Hour podcast. It was in 2000. That was as far as my preparation went. So you have to... 2011. It has over 200 and some episodes. I believe I've listened to all of them. And I love how your intro still kind of says about an hour or so about all the battles in your head. And most of them are about 2 hours.
We long ago ditched an hour or so. It's now just a place for all the honesty in your head, all the battles in your head, you know.
I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to play a quick clip of the intro of your podcast just to give people an idea about what the podcast is all about.
Okay.
my God, somebody does what I've been doing.
There's shame.
You have boundary issues.
I feel guilty for hating my mom.
I will be high by 4 p.m.
You feel helpless.
I will be in hell by 4:15.
Prison was not easy, but I deserved it. I think I'm just addicted to lying.
I rubbed my body in mud and I laid in the swamp. Didn't move for 6 hours.
I looked forward to and dreaded each meal at the same time.
I think I desperately wanted to talk about it, but I didn't know how to start the conversation.
And that's when I called the suicide hotline.
A good Craigslist experience is if you are alive at the end of it. So
that is when I first felt love. Like I first felt
reaching out to the people and sharing with the other people.
This intimate connection where people do stuff for each other without wanting something in return.
Yeah, I surrendered.
I think I was 28, and that was the first time I ever experienced that, and it was amazing.
I'm here with Cassie Snyder, who I corresponded with through.
All right. So, I don't know if you were able to hear that part, Paul.
I was not.
Okay.
I was not.
You were just probably imagining it in your head, maybe. Just wondering what we're going to get on with it. So what you just heard was a montage of past interviews that Paul has done on his show. And what I really think of your show as is a great force in kind of normalizing and destigmatizing mental illness.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that.
So, and I just think you're doing really important things for the community. So, thank you for doing everything you're doing.
Oh, right back at you. You know, I always say to the social workers and the therapists out there, I'm just the cheerleaders. You guys are the football team.
Well, and it's funny because, as much as I like to kind of comfort myself in stats and research-based methods, what I think we really connect with as individuals, no matter what our training is in stories.
I couldn't agree more. I mean, it's why movies are popular. There's just something. It's why I'm a documentary freak. I just can't get enough of a good story.
I think it's relatable. We can, in a very cognitive way, wrap our heads around statistics and all these kinds of things. But when it comes down to it, what's the relatable story? Because we need to hear that me too.
And we want to be entertained too on a certain level. I think I first really discovered the power of stories when I first started getting sober and going to support group meetings. I realized that my favorite part of them was when somebody would tell a story about what their life used to be like and how it changed and what their life is like now. And it was the information that I needed to help me live my life, but it was given in such a way that didn't feel like work. And so I thought in creating the podcast, if I could do that with stories of the battles we have in our heads with mental illness and, just negative thinking. I thought if I can just get some good storytellers on the show and to just have an honest conversation, I think that could be a really accessible way for people to start what are normally really difficult discussions to have.
And often discussions that aren't even happening.
Yeah.
Because of the notion that, we're the only ones going through this.
Yeah. There's so much stigma. I forget that sometimes living in Los Angeles and being in the creative arts, where it's almost a badge of honor if you're a little, quote unquote crazy. But if you're somebody that has a 9-to-5 job in a corporate office in Omaha, that might not be that cool to be bipolar or an alcoholic or,
We just don't talk about that. We look good. We, put on that game face and, we don't talk about the problems and why daddy's drinking or angry after work. And, we just are quiet about it. And secrecy is just grows that sense of shame, that stigma. I heard, it was a year or two ago, I was at a conference for ADHD. And, one of the keynote presentations was about stigma. And this research actually showed that when you are discussing mental illness, that actually initially stigma will go up before it goes down. And I thought that was a really interesting finding.
It is interesting. I wonder why.
Well, I think part of it is because it's almost the shock of, because we're not used to hearing this. And so it's uncomfortable to hear it. But, as you were saying, one of the reasons you like going to the support groups, it's shocking when you're in your own head, but when you start to hear other people talk about it, it kind of normalizes it.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. That makes sense.
So you've been doing this podcast, Mental Illness Happy Hour, for, when did you start it?
March of 2011. So 4 years.
And you've got a couple listeners from what I understand. No, I mean, it's a hugely successful podcast, which is, I just think it's gratifying in a lot of ways that this podcast that's about mental illness, of people having conversations about very difficult things, does so well. I think it's so well received, and I love the kind of the free flow of the format. What gave you the idea to start a podcast?
I went off my meds and got suicidal and didn't realize it was the depression coming back. And I thought, if I've been fooled by this, and I've been in therapy and seeing a psychiatrist and been on meds and been in support groups, and I know what the darkness looks like, and I've been fooled by it again. Imagine what somebody who doesn't even believe in mental illness is up against. And I thought, I got to get the word out there. And I think I have an idea for the format that will work, because I felt like there was a void that needed to be filled. I felt like emotional issues were being talked about in one of two ways. They were either being talked about in a preachy, textbooky, kind of condescending, for lack of a better word, Dr. Phil way, or in a Sedona, embrace Mother Earth, hold the crystal and release your buttocks, And neither of those worked for me. And I thought, we need to talk about the way my friends and I talk about stuff in support groups, and which is dark, inappropriate jokes, sometimes going from laughter to tears in the span of 3 minutes. The podcast medium, I think, is perfect for it, because there's no time limit. There's no censorship. You can really go with your instinct. And I can't imagine how much of my podcast would be edited if it were on broadcast radio. It would.
You couldn't. I mean, it would just.
Yeah.
It needs all of that, the dark spaces and that kind of those moments where you sort of feel uncomfortable. But that's, and I think, listening to some of the stories, there was one in particular about, it was a listener who experienced trauma, who was like attacked in her car. And just her discussing and how she was able to kind of just come back from that. I mean, it was.
Oh yeah. Brenda Fury, who was stabbed 20 times.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. Yeah. She was a very resilient person. And what I found interesting about her story too is and this is just my hunch, but I really think there was a relationship between her success in sports and her ability to weather the trauma that she went through. I think anything that builds your esteem and that tests your mettle, and where you learn the ups and downs and competing, and I was struck by that in her story, and it wasn't something I think that she ever consciously said, "Oh yeah, being playing softball at a super high competitive level helped me get through it." But when I brought it up, she was like, I think I remember her saying that made sense to her. And that's one of the things I love about doing the podcast is I get to be an armchair shrink with none of the responsibility.
It's gotta be nice sometimes,
Dude, it's the greatest. It's the greatest. It's yeah. It's people say, "Oh, have you ever thought of going to school to become a therapist?" I was like, "Why? I get the best part of the therapy. I get the conversations without any of the responsibility."
No one's going to sue you if you give them bad advice or.
Yeah, I mean, and that's why I say in the intro, it's not a doctor's office. I'm not a therapist. It's more like a waiting room that doesn't suck. I'm a jackass that tells dick jokes. But I think that's also what helps make it accessible to people is that we don't have all the answers. And that's why the self-help stuff of we have all the answers and tomorrow you're going to be the better you. And that stuff just never worked for me. It never moved me. And I think to heal, you first have to be moved. And I think that's one of the reasons why the podcast moves people, is because there isn't any authority. There isn't any, we've got it all figured out. Because that stuff always, A, makes me suspicious at the start. And B, if I don't get that result immediately, I think, well, here's just another instance where I'm different from the rest of the population and nothing's ever going to work out for me.
I know one of the things that you do on your podcast, which I love, is you have a pretty big online community, and they fill out surveys, and I just think it's so neat just listening to all of those, and I just can't even imagine how cool it is for you to be able to read all these people sharing truly their deepest, darkest inner thoughts.
It's such a privilege. It's been like going to graduate school for being human. The things that people share, it's been so comforting to me. It's also been really saddening.
I have to imagine that some of it has to be hard.
Yeah, I can't read too many. I can't sit down and read more than about a half hour or an hour of surveys, especially the shame and secrets survey. That tends to be the heaviest one.
Will you talk a little bit about that? Because, in the world of ADHD, in the ADHD community, there's so much shame because, we can say this with most mental illnesses. It's that we look normal on the outside, and so we have so much shame around, the things we didn't get done, the people we let down, the promises that we meant to keep but forgot. And there's just so much shame around that. And so I love that survey that you have about shame and secrets. Will we just talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah. It asks questions like, what kind of environment were you raised in? What are your darkest thoughts? What are the darkest things that you've ever done or been done to you? Have you ever shared it with anybody? How do you feel writing this down? What do you wish for? What have you not said to anyone that you would like to say? And have you ever been the victim of sexual abuse? And there's 3 things people can check. Yes, no, or some stuff happened, but I'm not sure if it counts. And some stuff happened, but I'm not sure if it counts, has been one of the most eye-opening things that I've experienced doing the podcast, because it will make your jaw drop what people aren't sure was sexual abuse. The most stuff that is so clearly sexual abuse. And it's one of the things I learned is that our brain has a way of minimizing trauma so that the world doesn't seem as scary to us. At least that's my opinion.
It's a protective measure in a sense. Our memory for pain, it's kind of pushes it to the side. I think that's why there's a lot of families with siblings. And not just the only children in the world, because childbirth, as far as, fortunately I was only a witness of it. Cause if it had to be me going through that, only child guarantee. The
other thing I just wanted to mention that I've really been, the light's been going off in my head lately, is one of the worst injuries or repercussions of trauma is the obsession to play Monday morning quarterback. Shoulda, coulda, woulda. It seems to really haunt people, whether the trauma was physical violence, sexual abuse, witnessing or somebody taking their life, or just having somebody in your life take their life when you're not even there. Any kind of trauma, it plagues people. There is this battle in your head to not let it go, to want to somehow go back and fix it.
Yeah. Now,
which obviously we can't.
Am I remembering this right, that you said on a recent podcast you started doing EMDR?
I did. I discontinued with that therapist, the first therapist, because it just wasn't a good fit. And then...
Would you mind telling my listeners just a little bit about EMDR in case they don't know?
Yes. It's called eye movement desensitization reprocessing. And the way it was discovered, from what I understand, was a therapist was walking through the woods one day. And, when you're walking through the woods, your eyes got to kind of go back and forth to make sure that you're not walking into a big hole or something. And she noticed that the thing that had been bothering her at the beginning of her walk had lessened. And she thought, there might be something here with eye movement and reprocessing trauma. And so began this treatment that apparently works very well with reprocessing trauma. And it's believed that it rewires how trauma resides in your brain. And I did feel some lightness in some of the stuff that we worked through. One of the things, I don't know if I would call it trauma, but something that just always grossed me out about my mom is the way that she would drink me in with her eyes, and the way she would kind of come up to me and often touch me inappropriately.
You used the term emotional incest in the past.
Yes. And we did some EMDR around that, and I felt I was very in touch with my rage at feeling like her object at the beginning of the session, my mom's object. And by the end of the session, I could feel that some of the anger dissipated. And then a second therapist that I had did a different type of EMDR where you weren't actually moving your eyes. It was you had a paddle in each hand that gave electrical pulses, or they would vibrate alternately.
Okay.
And apparently that accomplishes the same thing as moving your eyes does, and falls under the category of EMDR. And I had a really profound session with her where she just talked me into relaxing, and my back had been killing me. And I kid you not, I went home from that session, and over the next 4 days, I slept more than I've ever slept in my entire life. I was just absolutely exhausted, and it's like 50 pounds dropped from my body. It was profound. We did some more sessions after that, and I never felt much after that initial one.
Do you think that there was like the expectancy of I want it to be that great again? And then
probably, I'm not sure why I didn't get more stuff than that, but maybe that's the big thing that needed to happen with that. So I'm a believer. From what I understand, there's a lot of it has to do with who the therapist is, the way in which it's done. Apparently, you don't want to jump right into super heavy trauma right away. Mm-hmm. Some people have had bad experiences where they become re-traumatized by it if they're not led through it in the right way. So, the jury's still out as to how it works for everybody. Mm-hmm. But for me, I've had some good results from it. And I had one guest in particular, Lauren Ashley Bishop, whose life was profoundly changed for the better by EMDR.
Yeah, it really interests me. And, I sometimes wonder if, so for me, I say I have an allergy to paperwork. I break out in piles of procrastination. But I have real anxiety over things that are like, I know it's not a threatening thing. Like it's the response that I'm having in my body would be a similar response as if I were potentially under attack. And so I'm looking at this, boring, mundane paperwork, and I'm having this like real physical manifestation of anxiety. And it's, and I've practiced mindfulness, so I don't read too much into the thought, and I kind of just chalk it up to kind of cognitive processes that my brain's not really strong in. But I've been recently thinking, and we were talking about shame before, is the experiences of shame when it comes to administrative tasks where I've screwed things up. Is there a sense of trauma there that every time I'm doing something in that realm, like, is there an actual sense of trauma regarding paperwork? And it sounds absurd in one degree, but in actuality, I sometimes wonder, could that be more of what's going on versus this other explanation I've given to myself?
One of the things that I've allowed myself to do is is to not force a label on something, because I found that so much of the stuff that happened to me doesn't necessarily fit the hallmark description of many things.
Yeah.
And that was a hurdle that I could never overcome until I said to myself, let's just, for fuck's sake, say that what happened to me was under this banner of something, and let me start processing. And until I did that, I could never really get anywhere. And as I look back on what happened to me now with the stuff that happened with my mom, it's the feelings that were left in me that matter. And until I gave weight to them, I could never make any headway in having empathy for myself and drawing boundaries with her, because it didn't feel to me like it was justified in saying it was incest. And with what you were sharing, I don't think it's as important to say whether or not it's trauma as much as it is to say really intense feelings. And for me, that's where I would go in processing something like that, is saying, why do I have really intense feelings around this? Because then you can move forward without getting stuck in that bog of, no, it's not trauma. This is just me being a baby. So, so much progress is lost by having that battle in your head about, am I a baby? Am I an exaggerator? I know I wasted probably 20 years by minimizing what had happened to me. And when I came clean with my wife and finally said, here's what I think happened, what my mom did to me. She said, I've been waiting 20 years for you to say that. I mean, she could see it in the way my mom interacted with me, but I couldn't, because I was waiting for it to fit into a box.
Yeah, that makes sense. It's interesting too, the idea of labels. Obviously my podcast is focused on ADHD. My practice is focused on ADHD. And because I have ADHD, and I was talking to someone, earlier today, and we were having a very almost similar conversation about this idea that, every once in a while the thought crosses my mind of, what if I don't have ADHD and I realize it's something else? And it's like, how much does it really matter? So I think to a degree, it's important to have that label, because it makes you feel like you're not crazy. There's a reason why you're having these challenges. But, from actual, the utility of that diagnosis, well, what are you going to do about it? So if someone asks, like, what do you have ADHD? Well, so what do you do about that? It's like, well, it depends what your challenges are.
Think of it as a marriage you don't really give a shit about. the label. Yeah, I'm with it for now, but if we need to break up, it's not going to kill me. How's that for a horrible analogy? That's why I'm a podcast and not on broadcast radio.
Yeah, it's I think my listeners sometimes enjoy when I try to be funny and I fall flat on my face. And I'll say things like, I'm gonna probably edit that, and I never edit it. It's
I've come, from the feedback I get from my listeners, they like the stumbles and the other things. They like the humanness. They like to be reminded that
I'm so grateful for that, because it makes it so much easier.
Oh, I used to get into just such a spiral of perfectionism that it would just freeze me. And when I started getting feedback from listeners that were like, I love when you bag on yourself and you talk about how you want to go back and, edit that out and how it's killing you, that you describe something horribly. It's very freeing now to feel like
it normalizes negative thinking in a sense.
Yeah, it really does. The other epiphany I've had doing the podcast is realizing that one of the most insidious things we can have in being human is thinking that we have to be perfect to be loved, because in reality, people that are always trying to be perfect are like the least fun people to be around. People that are fun are the people that laugh at their mistakes. They make the best friends. They make the most fun partners. And for some reason, we put that pressure on ourselves because we think perfectionism is safety.
Where do you think that comes from?
I don't know. I'd like to go there and burn it wherever it comes from.
You know, because I work on that myself, the perfectionism. And, when
it just occurred to me where I think it comes from. I think it oftentimes comes from a critical parent who in their mind thinks that they're protecting us for our future by having us get everything right. But in reality, it winds up eroding our self-esteem, filling us with doubt and anxiety, and making us view the world as we view our parent, which is waiting to criticize us.
I think
go ahead. I'm sorry I cut you off.
No, I think there's a lot of validity to that. When I started my podcast, I was doing all the production and editing of it, and I got to this point where I was spending 10 hours editing a 45-minute podcast.
Oh my God.
And I was like, and I kept telling myself, all right, Eric, stop. But I kept going. Like, I was even saying out loud, okay, this is fine. Just keep, and I kept working on it. I finally found someone to do my post-production for it. Cause I can't. I mean, I would be sitting there adjusting the frequencies of my voice at certain, it was absurd.
Wow. That's over the top. I'm going to say that's crazy.
Thanks for making me feel really crappy about myself now. So I think I was talking to you about a little bit about Brene Brown's work. And I was listening to one of her, it was the Power of Vulnerability. It's a presentation she gave. And I was going for a walk and I was listening to this part and it truly stopped in my tracks because she said, one of the things she said was, we as a culture tend to view our sense of productivity as self-worth. And I was like, oh shit. Cause she hit the nail right on the head for me. And so it's, I try really hard to be productive because, in some ways I think of ADHD as this disorder of productivity. It's hard to get the shit done that you want to get done. It's like you think about it and you think about it. Sometimes we call it the disorder of good intentions. And, but when I realized, there's so much more to life and who we are than, just how much we get done. Go ahead.
Oh, that's one of the things that support groups help save my life for, is it brought meaning and purpose. Because one of the things you do in support groups is, once you start to get your legs underneath you, you turn around and you help somebody else who's new to the support group. And I began to feel this feeling of self-worth that had always been completely tied up into my professional career, which never felt satisfying enough to me. And it was a revelation to me that I could feel like I was enough by stuff that was completely outside my professional life. And that's the other thing I get from doing the podcast, is it brings such a feeling of meaning and purpose to my life.
I want to talk a little bit about the transition for you after you were done with dinner and a movie. But before we do that, I'd like to transition to a break real quick.
Sure.
So I'm going to take a quick moment to thank my sponsors, and I'll be right back.
Audibletrial.com/ADHD rewired for your free download. Trial.com/ADHD rewired. Trial.com/ADHD rewired. Go to audibletrial.com/ADHD rewired for your free audiobook download.
Get a Zoom room. Go to erictivers.com/Zoom. I use Zoom video conferencing for the ADHD Rewired coaching and accountability group. Zoom makes video conferencing fun and easy. Share your screen, collaborate with a whiteboard, record the audio and video. It's ADHD friendly. Go free or go pro, but go to erictivers.com/Zoom so they know that I sent you. That's erictivers.com/Zoom. This episode was released Tuesday, June 9th, 2015, and time is running out. Registration for this summer's ADHD Rewired Coaching and Accountability Group is going to close this Friday at 5 p.m. Central Time. 10 weeks of group coaching with accountability to help you follow through. Learn, grow, and connect. Improve your time management, planning skills, and overall productivity. Start the week with sharing your goals for the week. End the week reporting back on these goals. And if you are facing a specific challenge, you won't want to miss your chance to sit in the hot seat for our mastermind session. Imagine having 20 minutes where everyone in the group is completely focused on helping you work through one of your specific challenges. The best part is, these sessions are all recorded, so you can be fully present and not have to worry about taking notes. Alternating weeks, we will be each other's body doubles with our adult study hall session. I count on adult study hall sessions to go through my mail or empty my inbox. I do filing, faxing, and I even return calls and emails. During adult study hall, you will bring your important tasks. What are important tasks? These are the tasks that are, well, boring but important. Say goodbye to procrastination and say hello to adult study hall. The first few minutes we will share with each other what we are going to work on, and then we'll mute our microphones with cameras on, and then we'll get to work. Each session is 45 minutes. We will have 3 sessions per week for 10 weeks. Everything is recorded, so if you ever miss a session, you can still catch up with what you missed. Convenient payment plans are available, but you have to act now. Screening calls are required to join this group, so please don't wait. Call me at 224-993-9450. That's 224-993-9450. Or complete the contact form or schedule your free 20-minute consultation with me at coachingrewired.com. That's one word, coachingrewired.com. Or you can open up your podcast player right now and tap the ADHD Rewired logo that is in your now playing window, and the URL and phone number should show up. But just in case, the phone number one more time is 224-993-9450, or go to coachingrewired.com. There is still space available, but I cannot guarantee this will be the case if you wait. Act now and prepare to get your ADHD rewired. All right, we are back. I'm here with my guest, Paul Gilmartin. Do people usually refer to you as Gil? Like, do they ever say that?
Sometimes, my nickname with most of my friends is Gilly.
Really? I didn't know that.
A lot of people think Gil is my middle name.
Oh, it's not. It's okay. Wait.
No, Gilmartin is one word.
I feel really foolish right now.
Yeah. Yeah. People always think that about me. People always think Gil is my middle name. Yeah.
Huh. You just kind of blew my mind. It's what. I think there was a Seinfeld episode about the idea of like a word that you've been misusing for like your entire life, and then someone finally corrects you about it in your late 30s or something, and like, oh crap.
I love that commercial. I can't remember what it's for, but somebody calls something French benefits. The other guy just chastises him for it.
So, you did since in 1995 you started doing the TNT Dinner and a Movie.
TBS actually.
TBS, 3 letters, both starts with a T. It was really close.
Yeah, brother and sister network, so you weren't far off.
Okay.
Both started by Ted Turner.
Now you're making me feel so small. I'm just kidding.
I should have let it.
What else can I do wrong here? Yeah. I'll take my failure bow.
Yeah. So what about
talk to us about the transition, because you were doing the podcast during that transition, like when you were
it was the last year of the show. So for the last 9 months of the show, maybe 6 months of the show, was when I first started doing the podcast, and it wasn't a conscious transition. I didn't start the podcast to say this is going to be my next career. I started it thinking this is something that just kind of, there's a void and this needs to fill up. This would be a perfect thing to do, and I think it would be fun and interesting. And then 6 months later, the show got canceled, and so it was certainly nice to have it there because it gave me 6 months of doing the show without the feeling that, okay, all the chips are on this.
Mm-hmm.
So
what was the hardest part for you about the transition?
Not getting a regular check. That's probably the most difficult thing, having and I still don't get a regular check. I get donations.
Mm-hmm.
And it's kind of like a minimum wage job, but the greatest minimum wage job you could have. And I get some money from advertisers when they do advertise,
mm-hmm.
and that definitely helps. And if it's a good year for advertising, it's better than a minimum wage job. But I don't do it for the money. It's I do it because I enjoy it, and it brings a lot of meaning to my life. So the transition really wasn't difficult in many ways. It was enjoyable because there was a lot of things to doing the TV show that I didn't like. I loved the people that I worked with, and I loved improvising, but there's also a lot of pressure to creating a show that's improvised. And
it can't be easy.
No, it's not. And if you're a perfectionist, I would have trouble sleeping the night before we would tape. When we would be finished taping, a lot of times I would just collapse into bed and sleep for 12 hours until we, tape the next day. And I always thought, that's what I want to do. I want to make my living on camera. And by 6 months into doing the show, which ran for a long time, there was a part of me that began to realize I don't really like being on camera. I love being creative, but I don't like the pressure of being in a situation where there is that much up in the air, where it's kind of being run by a corporation that is really only interested in making money. And that's what I love about doing my podcast is I don't answer to anyone. It's also one of the things that can be difficult about it, but I love it. I don't miss anything except the people about doing and the paycheck. That's it. I'm very creatively satisfied. I don't miss doing stand-up. I really kind of retired from doing that about 3 years ago. And because everything that I want to say, I can say in the podcast medium without drunks, poised to heckle.
I bet is that hard for you to go into that environment?
It's not hard. You just get tired of it.
It's annoying.
Yeah, it's just annoying. It's just like, I don't know. It was an extremely beneficial way to make my living and a lot of fun for many years. But at a certain point, you grow, and I just kind of grew in a different direction where the way that I wanted to express myself, the comedy club was no longer a venue for that. I may start doing live performing at some point down the road, but it would be something different than what I would do.
Do you think it would be more about like mental illness?
Yeah. Or trauma. And I've gone and I've spoken. I got invited to speak at Johns Hopkins. To talk
I heard.
About
congratulations. That's huge.
Oh, it was great. It was so fulfilling on so many levels. And I had a couple of women reach out to me, a couple of female students that hadn't really confronted what had happened to them. And they kind of, opened up to me about what had happened to them. And I shared stuff that had happened with me. And, we emailed back and forth. And I think it meant a lot to both of us. And it brought that thing back up, which I keep talking about all the time, which is meaning and purpose. It just made me feel like what I've been through as a kid was not a waste, because that's what's great about support groups is it turns this terrible thing into this currency that makes your life better.
Yeah, I think a lot of therapists too have had situations in their life that have been very hard, and they've learned how to make that into something positive. I know for one of the things for me, when I was 14, my dad had a brain injury, and so looking at how just the brain works and what happens when does crazy things like decides to bleed in parts of the brain that change everything,
Wow.
and just seeing what that does. So that really helped me understand the importance of both self-awareness and also acceptance, because I would see my dad after he was recovering from his the surgery, really trying to do all the things he used to be able to do, but he didn't have the same abilities, and it was hard to watch. And so I think that really that taught me a lot, and I think it really shaped a lot of who I am now.
I couldn't agree more. And I always say that there is beauty in everything. There was even beauty in moments in the Holocaust. If you read enough stories about it, one starving person giving their last piece of bread to another starving person, a group of people in their bunks singing a song. I had this moment when I'd been sober about 2 years, and I'd broken my ankle. They had put some pins in it. It was killing me. The stomach flu hit me. I'm laying on the bathroom floor with 104 fever, and the phone rings and my dad has died. And in that moment, for some reason, my brain just went to this place of there's a larger picture to this, and you're going to get through this. It's okay. This isn't going to kill you. And this is just a part of life, and let's surrender to it. And I felt this joy and peace come over me. I don't know if joy might be too strong of a word, but I felt this peace come over me.
Serenity?
Yeah, serenity come over me. And I decided on my trip back to Chicago for my dad's funeral, I was going to look for the beauty in things. And the first thing I found before I even left was I was packing, and I realized, oh, I have a broken foot. I only have to pack one shoe. And it made me laugh. And, I got to get wheeled through the airport. I didn't have to sit in the line for security. Moments like that, that, once you realize that there are beautiful moments, even in the worst of circumstances, it makes it less scary, because then you can focus on what is beautiful instead of what is ugly. And at least that's worked for me.
So now, would that be under what you, I think you have coined the term awfulsome?
Yes.
Will you talk? I love that. That's
the
just
awfulsome moments. Yeah. Well, I began to realize as people were sharing things on the podcast, is they would share things that were really horrible at the time, but as you look back on them, there was something sickly funny about it. And it was like it was awesome and it was awful at the same time. And so we dubbed the term awfulsome. And there's a survey that people fill out where they share awfulsome moments. And I'll give you one, for example, and I'm paraphrasing it, but this girl was in a psych ward, and there was an old man in there who was super belligerent. And I can swear on this, right? On your podcast?
There will be a, yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And there was this old guy who was a real curmudgeon, and the nurse comes up to him, and she has this thing of vanilla pudding. And she said, Ezra, would you like some vanilla pudding? And he just curses her up and down. F you, you mother effer, shove that pudding up your blah, 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 blah. She walks away. She comes back 5 minutes later. Ezra, are you sure I can't interest you in some vanilla pudding? I told you, you effing whore, shove that thing up you. If you show me that again, I'm going to crack the bowl over your head. She walks away. She comes back 10 minutes later. She puts the bowl underneath his nose, and he starts to scream at her, and he stops and he goes, by George, is that butterscotch? And he takes the bowl of butterscotch pudding and he starts drinking it. And an old lady sitting next to him says to him, Ezra, why do you make such a scene when they bring you pudding? He says, because if I don't get the butterscotch. So here is this woman who is in this psych ward who got to experience this hilarious human scene.
Wow.
Wow. And that to me is life. Life is just filled with moments that you cried at the time, but in hindsight, you laugh. By George, is that butterscotch?
That's great. Wow. Now my only concern is now everyone's hearing all these things that they're going to all tune into your podcast now and they're going to abandon mine.
Yes, it's all a part of my plan. Come to the other side.
As I bump my microphone. All right. Let's see. Now, let me ask you, do you hear a lot about ADHD in kind of your circles? Because I know you go to different support groups, and because I was looking around on your website and I didn't see ADHD as one of the kind of options to select when there is like different mental illnesses that you can select.
What do you mean select?
Like they're one of the surveys. There was like where you can choose like anxiety, depression.
Oh, I don't have ADHD on that.
No.
Really?
It must be a attention to detail oversight.
Oh, I got to go back in and add that one. I can't believe I don't have that. That's crazy.
For this whole time, I was thinking, man, what is it? What does not think ADHD is a real disorder?
No,
Jeez.
no. I got to. Thank you for alerting me to that. I got to go put that in there. And in the meantime, 20 different thoughts are going to come to me, and then I'm going to forget to do it. Wouldn't that be ironic? The episode with Andrew Donnelly is a really good episode. He talks about having ADHD and how difficult it made for him to be a present parent. And until he got diagnosed, he could never really understand why school was such a struggle and why he would get these panic attacks and stuff like that. And then once he was diagnosed, everything began to make sense, and he got on some meds, and now he has some tools to begin to cope. But I will go put that. That's the struggle in a sentence survey, which is another survey that I love.
That's great.
People try to describe in a sentence what their individual issue battles are like.
And Paul, I have to tell you that it's been probably at least 5 times that I've attempted to go share my struggle in a sentence about ADHD, and then my brain just goes, it's not good enough. It goes blank, and then I go on to something else.
I get it.
Struggle in a sentence. I've tried this 5 times.
Well, about your ADHD, you should write, I've been here 5 times and I can't fill out this survey.
There it is.
That's what I learned doing stand-up is go, whatever the situation gives you, use it.
Yeah, I'm working with someone right now who I'm teaching how to do a podcast, who's trained at Second City, and she's actually my mentor in Toastmasters. And that's one of the things she talks about. Just kind of, you got to go with what happens. You can't have these plans ahead of time. You
can't. And I learned that going through Second City's training program. You know, improv classes are a really great tool to kind of prep you for life. If you can let go of the idea that I need to get something out of this, professionally, if you can just go to it and say, I'm just going to, let go of judgment and say the first thing that comes out of my mouth. That's one of the things that Fred Willard says he does. And he's in all those Christopher Guest movies, and he's always so funny. He says he just says the first thing that comes to his mind when they are improvising a scene.
Sometimes I think that I become over-inhibited because there's been times where saying the very first thing that comes to my mind has gotten me in trouble. So I need to find the right avenue for that.
Yeah. I think it depends on what your intent is. You know what I mean?
So here's what we're going to do. We are at about 50 minutes in. So I want to start winding this thing down. But before we do, what we're going to do is I'm going to invite you to the random question round. This is the part of the show that has nothing to do with ADHD, which then paradoxically has everything to do with ADHD. Okay. Are you ready?
Yep.
Okay. If you can invent something or improve upon a current thing, what would it be?
If I could invent or improve upon a certain thing, I would say 2 things. A way to convert salt water into fresh water, and a way to make solar panels more powerful. Because I think the 2 things that are threatening our planet the most is running out of water and carbon emissions. And those are two things that I really wish would happen.
So you've discovered how to do this, and you created a clean bottled water product. And now you have to name it. What's it called?
Holy shit. Said the first thing that came to my mind.
That was good. You threw me for a loop. I didn't expect it to be that quick. That was good. Sugar cereals, marshmallows or no marshmallows?
Oh, marshmallows. What are you, a fascist? It's the best part. It's the best part. Well, why would you buy Count Chocula if you weren't going to eat the marshmallows? That's like saying I want a banana split, but can you hold the ice cream?
That doesn't. I was at Panera a while back, and I was ordering a sandwich, and I asked them to hold the onions, and then I ordered a French onion soup.
Did you really? Fantastic.
And I was with my sister-in-law, and she goes, "What?" I was like, "Well, raw onions are totally different than."
That's true. That's true.
I do have a point. You know,
I back you up on that one.
Thank you.
Yes.
I feel validated.
That's what it's all about.
What is the best cookie of all time?
The best cookie of all time?
Mm-hmm.
A good oatmeal raisin. Or a chocolate chip cookie that's crunchy on the outside but chewy on the rest of it, and just browned. You know, the edges are kind of browned. Yeah, those are my two favorite cookies.
If you would start another podcast, what would it be called?
I don't know what the name of it would be, but it would be something post-apocalyptic, and it would be I don't know exactly what it would be, but it would take all of my anxiety about carbon emissions and water shortages, and it would be about that. And I'm kind of still tossing the idea around, but the part of me that is afraid of pressure and responsibility is like, let's just play Scrabble.
You would hate to play Scrabble with me because it takes so long, and I love Scrabble, but I'm also an awful speller, which is kind of funny that I like Scrabble.
Other than that, you're great at it.
No, I just like to play.
Yeah.
Okay. It's 1985. How old are you in 1985?
I'm 22.
Okay. Did you play Nintendo in 1985?
I didn't play Nintendo until 1988 when the first Nintendo that I was aware of came out, and oh boy, did I play it.
What was your favorite game?
Mario Brothers or The Legend of Zelda. Those were my two. Yeah.
Do you remember in Mario Brothers? Do you remember how to get to the last level? Like that like the cheat?
Yeah, and I forget what it was. I think you had to drop down into some type of a hole or something. I can't remember. Do you?
I think it was in 1-3 takes you to 4-1, and then 7-1 to 8-1, I think. But you have to have firepower, because if you get those monkeys that are throwing those things at you, you have no chance.
The way I finally cracked it was somebody with a VHS taped themselves playing the whole thing, and then I finally realized what it was. And I was growing pot at the time, so just imagine. I just started doing stand-up professionally, so I was getting high almost every waking hour playing Nintendo, and then stumbling to the comedy club to do a half-hour material. That didn't last for too long before I had to get rid of the pot plants. I was like, be careful what you wish for.
Well, was this in Chicago, or was this...
Yeah, it was in Chicago.
Because you grew up in Chicago, right?
I did, yeah.
Okay. I think I'm gonna end it on the pot plants.
All right. Always end with the weed.
It might start off good, but after a while, it can't lead to anything good.
Yeah.
That's what the research says anyways.
Sure.
Well, Paul, thank you so much for coming on the show. How can people find you, your podcast, website, all that good stuff?
The website is mentalpod.com, and they can just they can either Google Mental Illness Happy Hour. You can download it or stream it from the website, or you can access it through iTunes. Just do a search for mental illness on iTunes, and you'll see it come up. And make sure you click on when the logo comes up for the show. Click on the logo, and that way you'll make sure you get all the most recent episodes. Because otherwise, if you search it, all that comes up are the most popular ones. So the most recent ones may not come up.
And don't forget to click subscribe so you never miss an episode.
That's
and
right.
If you want to earn a gold star, you can leave Paul and me a review, 2 for 1. Because I know, you hear me ask all the time about leaving a review because it helps, my podcast show up on iTunes. You don't have to put it off anymore. Now you can rate 2 really good podcasts all at the same time, and you'll feel really good about yourself.
You being of service,
Thanks,
meaning
Paul.
and purpose.
That's right. That's right.
All right. Thanks, Eric.
Thanks. Thank you for listening to another episode of ADHD Rewired. And if you're new to the show, welcome to ADHD Rewired. We are more than just a podcast. We are a community focused on learning, growing, and connection. You could see a full outline of this and all other episodes with all the links and other resources mentioned during this interview at ADHDrewired.com. Help support this podcast by checking out my sponsors. I use Zoom video conferencing nearly every day, and so can you. Go free or go pro. But please, go to erictivers.com/Zoom so they know that I sent you. And you can get a free audiobook from Audible at erictivers.com/Audible. And next time you shop Amazon, use the Amazon search portal at ADHDrewired.com. A small percentage of your purchase will go to support this show, and it doesn't cost you anything extra. You can also support this podcast by leaving an honest rating and review in iTunes or Stitcher. This really helps other people find this show. And don't forget to hit subscribe so you never miss an episode. Don't just be a passive listener, be an active member of the ADHD Rewired community. We are on Facebook. You can like our page, but please submit your request to join our free and growing community. And don't forget to check your other inbox because I screen everybody before they come into our community.